Imagine being asked to leave a public event simply because someone assumes you don't belong. That's exactly what happened to one woman, but what no one realized at the time was that she wasn't just anyone. She was the governor. In a tense and shocking moment, an officer approached her, clearly unaware of who she was, and ordered her to leave. The crowd stood still, some curious, others unsure how to react. And then the truth came out, and what happened next left everyone speechless. This story is more than just an uncomfortable misunderstanding. It's a powerful reminder about assumptions, identity, and respect. Stay tuned to hear how one woman turned an awkward confrontation into an unforgettable lesson, not just for the officer, but for everyone watching. The event was supposed to be a celebration, a gathering of local leaders, citizens, and community members. People were chatting, enjoying the lively atmosphere, and waiting for the keynote speaker to take the stage. Among the attendees was a black woman dressed modestly, blending in with the crowd. She wasn't surrounded by security or flashing her title. She looked just like anyone else, standing quietly, observing the scene. Then, out of nowhere, an officer approached her. His tone was firm, polite at first, asking her to leave. "This area is reserved for officials," he said, clearly unaware of who he was talking to. Some nearby spectators started to whisper, their curiosity piqued. The woman didn't react the way most people might. She stayed calm, composed, and measured in her response. But as the officer grew more insistent, a murmur began to spread through the crowd. Something wasn't adding up. As the officer continued to press her, the woman maintained her calm demeanor, asking simple but pointed questions. "Why do you think I don't belong here?" she asked, her voice steady but firm. The officer hesitated, fumbling for words. The crowd, now visibly intrigued, began inching closer, trying to catch every word. Some looked at the woman, scanning her face as if trying to place her, while others exchanged confused glances. Who was she, and why wasn't she leaving? The woman didn't answer right away. Instead, she looked at the officer, giving him one last chance to realize the mistake on his own. But he stood firm, clearly feeling justified in his actions. The organizer, however, had already pieced it together. His face turned pale as he stammered, "Governor, I am so sorry." A few people in the crowd started to step in, questioning the officer's actions. "She's not causing any trouble," one man said. "Why are you singling her out?" The officer, now visibly uncomfortable, responded by doubling down, insisting that she wasn't authorized to be there. But the tension only grew. The woman gave no indication of backing down, and a few whispers about her identity began circulating. Some were beginning to realize the gravity of the situation, but not the officer. The crowd grew restless as the exchange continued. People were no longer just whispering. They were taking out their phones, recording what was happening. The woman, still calm and composed, stood her ground. "I think you should take another look at who you're speaking to," she said, her tone unwavering but with an edge of authority that hinted at something more. The officer, seemingly unfazed, crossed his arms. "Ma'am, I don't need to look at anything." "You don't have the proper credentials to be here," he said firmly. The woman raised an eyebrow, but said nothing, letting his words hang in the air. By now, several people in the crowd began to recognize her. A few gasped audibly, their eyes widening as they whispered her title to those around them. The energy shifted. One voice broke through the murmurs. "That's the governor." The ripple effect was instant. People started moving closer, their curiosity turning to disbelief. But the officer still didn't catch on, his confidence unwavering. The woman finally took a step forward, locking eyes with him. "Are you sure about that?" she asked. The tension in the air was palpable, and the crowd held its breath, waiting to see what would happen next. The officer blinked, momentarily thrown by her pointed question, but before he could respond, a man in a suit pushed through the crowd. He looked flustered, his eyes darting between the woman and the officer. The crowd recognized him as one of the event organizers, and his sudden appearance only added to the tension. "Excuse me," he said, his voice strained. "What's going on here?" The air grew heavy as the weight of the situation hit everyone. The officer froze, his confidence crumbling. But just as the truth began to settle, someone in the crowd called out, "Wait, who called security on her in the first place?" That single question shifted the focus. Now, all eyes were not just on the officer, but on the deeper issue unfolding. Was this a simple misunderstanding, or was something bigger at play? The tension climbed higher as people started questioning the motives behind the confrontation. The officer's face went red as the weight of the organizer's apology sank in. He opened his mouth to say something, but no words came out. The woman took a deep breath, her calm exterior never wavering. "It seems there's been a misunderstanding," she said, addressing the officer. Her tone was steady but firm, commanding respect without raising her voice. "I am the governor of this state, and I was invited here as the keynote speaker. Now, do you still think I don't belong?" The crowd erupted into a mix of gasps and murmurs. The officer stumbled over his words, trying to apologize, but the damage was already done. The event organizer stepped in quickly, urging the governor to the stage, but she paused. Turning back to the officer, she said, "This moment isn't just about me. It's about how we treat people when we assume we know their story." Just as the crowd thought the situation was resolved, another voice from the back shouted, "This isn't the first time he's done this." A ripple of shock went through the crowd as more people began speaking up, sharing similar stories of being unfairly singled out. The governor listened, her expression growing more serious. What started as a personal confrontation had now become a call to action. Instead of heading to the stage, she turned back to the crowd and said, "Let's talk about this, together." The governor's decision to engage with the crowd turned the event into something far more meaningful than anyone expected. She invited people to share their experiences, fostering an open dialogue about respect, bias, and assumptions. The once tense atmosphere shifted as voices rose, not in anger, but in understanding. People listened, shared their stories, and began to see the bigger picture. The officer, visibly humbled, offered a heartfelt apology, admitting he hadn't considered the impact of his actions. The governor accepted it graciously, but emphasized the importance of learning from moments like this. "It's not just about one person's mistake," she said. "It's about how we grow as a community." By the end of the day, what began as a confrontation transformed into a lesson in empathy and accountability. As the governor finally took the stage, she left the crowd with one powerful reminder. Respect should never depend on titles. It's something everyone deserves.